Right, folks, this one's going to be particularly verbose. It's going to be particularly long, contrived, tenuous, lot of pretentious nonsense there. I've been away on holiday for 2 weeks. My first pod in nearly 2 weeks, but I was back. I was back in Scotland. I was back at my home. I had been at a holiday home, and then I was back at my own home on Friday night. So I could have been at Murrayfield on Saturday. So I'm going to have to do a whole bit about how it won't take that long, but it'll be one of the shortest bits in this terrible pod. Is going to be how I'm actually a better Rangers supporter than you because I didn't go to a game at Murrayfield against Manchester United. That's going to be painful. Just a brief example of what's coming up here. So to get you through it, and the fact that there's so much to catch up on because it's nearly a fortnight since we're away, and who Rangers haven't signed, who Rangers should sign, who Rangers still haven't sold yet, who we have sold. Probably going to be Dynamo Kiev that we're playing in the Champions League third round qualifier. Going to look at that. Birmingham City tonight. Say Man U on Saturday. There's so much to look at, and I've been doing most of these under the guise of being a Euro 2024 review. I always end up talking about Rangers, but I have to mention the Euro 2024 final because I didn't cover that, and if nothing else, I am a completist. So you're going to need something to think about, something to keep your mind occupied while I'm prattling on. And I'm going to give you a wee bit of trivia. It's a trivia question, but I don't know the answer. I'm actually questioning you. Do you know? Does anybody out there know the answer to this? I'll set it up for you. Lawrence Shankland, I was at the game. I was at both the games. We played Queen's Park at Hampden in 3rd Division in 2012-2013. But the second one of those, we beat them 4-1, and Queen's Park's goal was scored by Lawrence Shankland at the start of his career. Last season, the League Cup semi-final, Lawrence Shankland scores Hearts' penalty against us when we beat Hearts 3-1 in the League Cup semi-final at Hampden. So I was at that game, so I saw Shankland score. Me being there doesn't really matter. It just makes it more of a boast for me. As I say, I've not been watching our friendlies at all, even on television, so even on Rangers TV, so I'm trying to kind of make up for that. And I was also at, this is not the way to make up for things to Rangers supporters, I would imagine a lot of Rangers supporters, but I was at the Scotland-Finland game, Scotland's last game before they went to the European Championships this summer. We drew 2 each in that friendly on the Friday night with Finland, and Lawrence Shankland scored in that game. Now, he scored at Hampden for Scotland before, I think it was against San Marino, the Faroes. It was one of the minnows. They don't really, San Marino, because you don't usually beat the Faroes by 6-0. I think he was at Dundee United at that point in time. I had a ticket, but I was away at another holiday home in Menard. I was up there for the week, so I had to give my ticket away. I remember that, but so I saw him scoring. I finally saw him scoring live. It doesn't matter when I saw it or whether I was there or not when he scored that goal against Finland. The main thing is Lawrence Shankland has scored for 2 different clubs and his country at the National Stadium, and I've seen him, scoring for. I don't think he got to a semi-final or a final with Dundee United when he was there. I don't know if he scored there for Ayr. Maybe he scored there for Ayr. Ayr played Queen's Park at some point at Hampden. I don't know, but that's what I'm talking about in terms of me seeing it. I can't think of another player, never mind me seeing it or not, who scored for 2 different clubs and his country at Hampden at the National Stadium. Like, for example, I've seen Ali McCoist. I've been there when Ali McCoist has scored for Rangers at Hampden, and I've been there when Ali McCoist has scored for Scotland at Hampden. But random examples: the Scottish Cup semi-final against Celtic in, what was that, 95-96. He scored the semi-final against Celtic in that game. Laudrup scored, we beat them 2-1. And I was at the Scotland-Greece game in the qualifiers for Euro 96 where he scored the only goal of the game late on in that one. So there you go. I've seen Ali McCoy scoring for, but I didn't see Ali McCoy, if he ever did, scoring for St Johnstone, for example, at Hampden. Did he play a friendly with Sunderland did Kilmarnock against Queen's Park? Did they play for Kilmarnock at Hampden and score? I don't know. I don't think so. So can you just tell me any other player who has scored twice? In fact, no, let's not even make it Scotland. I know a lot of countries don't have a fixed national stadium, but an England player, for example, who scored for 2 different clubs, perhaps in the League Cup final, the FA Cup semi-final or something at Wembley, and also scored for England at Wembley. I can't think of anybody who's done that, but anybody else throughout the world apparently who's achieved that. Because the thing is, Lawrence Shankland, if we do sign him, whether you think it's a good idea to sign him or not, I think it is a good idea. It's just a rumour, maybe being generated by your media for some interest. But if Lawrence Shankland was to sign for Rangers, like imminently, he's going to have to play at Hampden. It doesn't matter how we get on in the League Cup or get on in the Scottish Cup next season. Lawrence Shankland will play, you would imagine, at least against Motherwell, Ross County, Dynamo Kiev, it looks like, in Europe. And whoever we draw in the League Cup, he'll play against all of them, at least at Hampden. We're probably going to be at Hampden till Christmas. So he would then have, you would hope he would get at least one tap in. He scored for 3 different clubs and his country, all at the National Stadium. Think of any other player who's done that, any Scottish player who's done that. There must be. Like David Cooper, I saw him scoring endless goals for Rangers at Hampden. He was a specialist, and I was behind the goal that he scored into for Scotland against Australia in that World Cup playoff. Now, David Cooper signed for Rangers famously after doing really well for Clydebank against us, to the point where John Gregg had to threaten to break his leg to stop him. But I know we did play Clydebank in a semi-final at Hampden just before my time, just round about the time I started going to Rangers games. I don't think it was the 2 games. Did David Cooper score for Clydebank at Hampden in that game? I don't know. But I can't think of anybody else who's done it for 2 different clubs and his country. Never mind 3 clubs and their country, all at National Stadium. That's just a trivia question that's meant to keep you going, and that's lasted 6 minutes. Oh, Jesus, sorry, folks. Anyway, this is your FATEC Euro 2024 final review pod, your Rangers against Manchester United review pod, your Rangers against Birmingham City preview pod, your Rangers transfer shenanigans pod, your Rangers against Dynamo Kiev or Partizan Belgrade in the UEFA Champions League third qualifying round preview pod, coming to you in association with the Gersnet microphone and with the Cathedral Bells of Ripon, the Ripon Cathedral Bells, which you can listen to with a glass of wine in the wee holiday cottage that you've rented, pretending that you weren't drunk, pissed out your skull on Stella the previous night, and just no, let's put the phones down. No, let's not look at the clock. Let's just listen to the Cathedral Bells and ding. Is it 5 dings? Does that mean it's 2:15? Oh, 7 dings. Does that mean it's 2:30? Well, no, it's 2:45 now. And but they actually come in pretty handy the following morning when you've had 2 bottles of wine, and it's the Montepulciano de Bruzzo that's like $5.99 in the Morrisons in Ripon, as well as the Morrisons in Glasgow, followed by that Côte de Rhône, which you don't know anything about wine. You're just looking at 13.5%. I'll take that. And you're absolutely gutted. So the next morning, because it's July and the sun is out down there, it could be, anything between 5 o'clock in the morning and 12 noon. It's ding, dong, ding. But you can listen to the bells, and the bells will tell you, ding, ding. Oh, it's 7 o'clock in the morning, right? You can tell, because once it gets to 0 o'clock, it does the ding for every 7 o'clock in the morning. That's great. I've got a few more hours in my kit before I have to go sightseeing, and I don't have to lean across to that bed. No, just it's like you're in that state. Just leaning across to the bedside cabinet to pick up your phone, just to tilt it up far enough to look at the time is enough to make you piss the bed. Well, it certainly is at my age anyway. So, yeah, Ripon Cathedral Bells, happy to have them as sponsors of this podcast. These podcasts I've been doing throughout the summer, nominally been European Championships reviews, nominally Euro 2024 review pods. Every stage of the Euros, European Championship finals in Germany this summer have been reviewed for about 2 seconds before I go into talking about Rangers. Let's not make this any different. Let's just round it off with the final, of course. And one thing I have to say to you, do you notice that behind me? Keen fans of this pod, and there's at least 2 of you, will have noticed, even though I've got all the visuals back to front, because I'm as bad at filming stuff as I am at editing my own patter. It's all back to front, but that's a bag from the Atletico Madrid club shop. I just shoved it up there randomly for a bit of visual fluffery, because Alvaro Morata, I must have been talking about him in one of the pods, talking about Spain and him being up front for Spain as they eventually won at the European Championships. Now, I put that up before the final. I put that up at the point of the semi-finals. It just like, I've got an Atletico Madrid pennant somewhere, proper Atletico Madrid pennant somewhere, but I'd bought my nephew an Atletico Madrid top when I was over in Madrid, 11 years ago. I saw Atletico at Manzanares, at their old stadium, the Calderón, before they moved to the Metropolitano, and they beat Real Sociedad in the final now. Not in the final, the night I saw them, it was in La Liga. Davy Moyes was Real Sociedad manager, but they beat Real Sociedad, but that was a big thing for me. But I'm just going to show you this. Now, look away now, because I'm going to get up and it's no pretty. But if you see this bag here, I remember when I put it up, I'm going to pull it off the wall now. when I put it up, I had a wee glance inside and I thought, should I bother? But no, I don't bother, Alec. But inside this bag, this has been inside this for like a couple of years, I think. There's a whole lot of stuff in a poly bag, which is just all my travel documents, just random souvenirs. I'm a bit anal retentive about Spain, about my journey to Madrid that day. But there's also this Real Sociedad neckerchief. Absolutely beautiful thing. And I've seen Real Sociedad at Ibrox in pre-season friendly tournament back in '87, summer of '87 as well. But there we are, Real Sociedad. Beautiful neckerchief. I got that from my sister-in-law. I've been to San Sebastian. I spent a week in Bilbao at the start of the 2007-2008 season. I stayed in the Hotel Zenit. It's called the Hotel Zenit. End of that season, we ended up playing Zenit. Anyway, so I've been to Bilbao. I've been to San Sebastian. Been to San Sebastian. But my sister-in-law got me that in a separate trip. No, he's a football fan. Get him something football. So she brought that back for me. It's absolutely lovely. And I've also got this, which isn't Atletico Madrid. It's the club of whose fans moved to Madrid and formed Atletico Madrid. It's a neckerchief for Athletic Bilbao. Athletic Bilbao, yeah, that's old pub, smart arse, boring factoid, but there you go, if you can see that, it's back to front. It's from the Copa del Rey final in 2009, does it say 2008, 2009? My mate Jason, who's a mad Celtic fan, he was over at that game, the Copa del Rey final, Athletic Club against Barcelona, and he brought me that back. We got a neckerchief there. So I hung that up in that wall there, and inside it, before the final, between the semi-finals and the final, and inside it, apart from some boring travel documents, is a Real Sociedad neckerchief and an Athletic Bilbao neckerchief, the two biggest Basque clubs. The two goals that Spain scored that won them the final of the European Championships this summer were scored by Nico Williams of Athletic Bilbao and is it Mikel Oyarzabal of Real Sociedad. But, I mean, that's just amazing. That's not getting to do with anything. That's just I basically won the Euros for Spain without knowing that I'd done it. So always watch the Fat Egg podcast. They really are. My name's Alec Anderson. A chair is still a chair, even when there's no one sitting there. But a chair is not a house, and a house is not a home, when there's no one there to hold you tight, and no one there you can kiss. Good night. So, briefly talking about the European Championship final, 1-2-1 by Spain. Spain, the first team already, before they went into that final, to have won 6 straight games at European Championship finals. They then became the first to win 7 straight games at the European Championship finals. They won all their games. The Euros get expanded to 7 games in 2016, but 7 games required to win it. And suddenly afterwards, like Barney Roney, who's a brilliant journalist in The Guardian, Galen Balag, who I love as well, famous in Britain, a Spanish football expert. Everybody basically saying, yes, Spain, that's the model, that's the way. And Spain, they had one of the greatest golden periods ever in international football when they won the Euro 2008, the 2010 World Cup, and Euro 2012. And there's no denying, obviously, Barcelona and Real Madrid are European club competition. They just set it up, basically. We're going to talk about this in terms of Birmingham City, because Barcelona beat them in one of the finals, the first 2 finals of the Fairs Cup, which was established before the Cup Winners' Cup, the forerunner to the UEFA Cup and then the Europa League. Barcelona won the first 2 of that, and the first competition took 3 seasons to complete, and the second edition of the Fairs Cup took 2 seasons to complete, 1955 to 1960, and the first 5 European Cups, whereas Real Madrid won them all, 55-56 season through to 1959-60 season. So Barcelona and Real Madrid have always dominated European football. They're the only 2 clubs to have appeared in any European club final in every decade, the 50s and in every other decade since then, of European club competition. So they've got the 2 most powerful clubs in the world, the Spanish, and it was fantastic. But the thing that was really good about Spain winning this was that it proved that amazing purple patch they had when they won 2 Euros and a World Cup in consecutive competitions. That wasn't just Spain now reverting to just being the quarter-final team that they always were. They've managed to keep it going. They've now got a legacy. They've got that innate confidence that comes from winning trophies. We've seen that with France. I grew up in France, like Spain, had won Euros that they'd won on home soil, and other than that, they were massive underachievers, had never reached a World Cup final, had never reached the finals of another Euros, the final of another Euros, and then they got to the stage. For me, with France, it wasn't so much when they won the 98 World Cup and then Euro 2000, that was what transformed them. But then when they lost the 2006 World Cup final, when they lost Euro 2016 final, even they lost the last World Cup final, they just became a team who, famously, they'd never been able to get past the semis of a World Cup. And now they were just getting to the final and losing it only on penalties in between winning World Cups and Euros. So the same thing has happened with Spain now. They've now done a bit. Before these Euros, nobody expected. There's been a kind of bit of revisionism went on in the final whistle. Why aren't England playing like Spain? Why aren't England doing it like Spain? Spain's the place to be, the team to watch. Spanish football is the greatest. And the women won the World Cup, beating England in the final, the Women's World Cup. But England did get to the final of that as well. And I have here the flickering you can hear is the Euro 2024 team guide by when Saturday comes. And in that, they ask the Spanish expert, a chap called Simon Hart, what are the expectations for the team? And he says that the Grupo de la Muerte, the group of death, is how the Spanish media have dubbed Group B, and with good reason. Italy beat Spain in the Euro 2020 semi-finals, while Croatia took them to a shootout in last summer's Nations League final. The absence of midfielder Xavi, sidelined by an ACL rupture, does not help, but they have the quality to go far, though whether they have the X factor required to win is questionable. So that's a guy who's kind of biased towards Spain, and even he's saying, no, they can do it, but people weren't exactly getting themselves into a frenzy of anticipation about Spain, and all over the world people were just basically, non-Spanish observers were thinking they're a quarter-final team at best, because I saw them last year getting beat by Scotland. I was at Hampden watching Scotland, not just beating Spain, but just basically owning them. Spain had the ball for the whole game, but we were quite happy to let them have it. It just got under their skin. And the guy who became player of the tournament this summer, quite rightly, Rodri, he's losing the rag with Scotland. He's making chippy comments about the way we played the game and all that at the end of the game, at the end of the match that night. We're the last team to not lose to Spain at any juncture of Euros 2024. So that's a kind of boast. That's the best kind of boast Scotland can manage if we ignore how we actually played in this summer's Euros. But Rodri, who had to come off at half time in the final, and you thought, you went from thinking that's a terrible injury. We're getting very excited in the BBC, Lineker and Shearer and what have you, with Rodri getting injured and not being able to come on for the second half, because England had gone toe-to-toe with Spain in that first half. There was nothing between the two teams. And that old problem that British teams can't adjust, the international teams, they can't adjust, need to be on it for the whole game. And when the opposition can take a rest, can take a break. They've got that 2-3 paced thing, continental teams, South American teams. Spain came out in the second half and scored within a minute of kick-off, and you're thinking, was it actually a tactical change? Was Rodri actually injured? But no, even without him, they could up it a gear, and they reacted much better to the first half stalemate than England did. But we're looking at an England team who, I watched England doing this in the semi. And this is why you're a Scotsman. Why do you care? Well, the first reason is, as I've said in these previous pods, previously in this little channel of mine, what England do trickles up to Scotland, or trickles down. It has an effect on the whole of football in the British Isles. Very relatable. There's a whole political thing. I've done a pod further down this channel, Rangers versus England and Rangers versus Scotland. You can check out them if you want to get my attitude in general towards the England national team and towards the Scottish national team. But I don't really have anything particularly against England, and I was quite happy to see them win the Euros once Scotland were out of it, if I possibly could, because apart from anything else, it'd be a change. It'd just be nice to see England actually doing something, going all the way for once. And going all the way is now lifting the trophy, whereas going all the way for England used to be just getting to the final, because that was something they didn't do. Other than 1966, they had never reached, they'd never reached the final of the Euros. And Gareth Southgate, the paneling he's getting, he suffered from that same thing when he got to the semi-finals of the 2018 World Cup. They score early doors against Croatia, they're dominating, and then Croatia just react and England can't. England can't change gears again. They've got into that mode of defending the 1 goal lead. They did the same in the final of the last Euros, where they took an early lead against Italy, and then Italy weathered the storm and come back at them, and England couldn't really react, but ended up losing on penalties, not losing 2-1, as they did against Croatia in that semi-final. And in this Euros, England have gone behind. Yeah, they've reacted badly to drawing 0-0 at half-time, but they've come back. It's been, they've equalised, as they did all through every round, every knockout round at this Euros. England went behind, and this was the first one they hadn't won, and they only lost this game to a goal. They equalised through Cole Palmer on the night, and they only lost this game to Oyarzabal's goal 3 minutes from the end of normal time. It's not, you would think England were absolutely destroyed by a team playing football from a different planet. And Spain were great. Spain were, obviously the best team of the tournament, taking home the Henri Deloney. The Henri Deloney trophy kind of proves that, but they were magic to watch. They were really good. They were really nice to watch. But I think there's a big difference between good football and aesthetically pleasing football, and that's been missed out a lot. I thought England was, but their last 16 game in particular against Slovakia, they looked like they were out. They looked like they were out of ideas as well. But Jude Bellingham scores an overhead kick in the last minute to equalise. Is that not dramatic? Are you not entertained? Is that not what the big players are there for? These players that were thinking Gareth Southgate should be getting more out of. Well, he scored an overhead kick to equalise in the last minute. That's pretty spectacular. And Slovakia had beaten Belgium. They're not exactly a bad team. And as I said in previous pods, it's quite easy to paint Spain's run to the final as being lucky as well, in terms of who they got in the draw, the worst Germany team in terms of finals performances ever, really. They got Georgia in the last 16, who they'd put 10 goals past in their qualifying group. Georgia getting there through the back door that Scotland used the third division of the Nations League when we previously qualified for the Euros in 2020. And they get a terrible France who just kind of seemed to have forgotten they couldn't score a goal from open play. The France that they played in the semi-final. So it's every bit as easy to paint it as a lucky draw for Spain. It wasn't. Teams who, you don't win tournaments by accident, but neither do you get to the finals of them by accident. England won the World Cup in 1966, and they replayed the final, the full 66 World Cup final, extra time included, of course, on Channel 4 on the Saturday, the day before the Euro 2024 final, and it was terrible to watch, an awful game. And you're reminded of, everybody's thinking about Baddiel and Skinner, Three Lions, football's coming home. Watching that, I'm thinking more about Baddiel and Skinner, the Fantasy Football League programme, where they had the segment that was old football is crap, old football is crap, old football was crap. And they would show you moments from, Stanley Matthews, the black and white period, where you've been told these guys were legends, and by modern standards, the football they were playing was terrible, really boring, really slow. But I think even at the time, even in 1966, that England team were known as the wingless wonders. There was an idea that they'd sacrificed flair and style to get a tournament won. So this idea that's been put around just now that England were, the great England teams of the past, like the teams that the players that Gareth Southgate has got at his disposal, should be playing better football, should be playing more attractive football. It's just nonsense. England have never played particularly attractive football. England, they won the World Cup in 66, and they reached 3 semi-finals after that. 68 Euros, Italia 90 World Cup, and Euro 96. That was the only other semi-finals they had reached. The only other time they'd got to the semi-finals, and they lost all those semi-finals. Gareth Southgate, in his 8 years in charge, has reached 3 major semi-finals, as well as the semi-finals of the Nations League, but he's reached 3 major semi-finals, and he's won 2 of them. The only England manager ever to get to the final of the Euros, the only England manager ever to get to 2 successive finals of a competition, the only England manager to take them to a final on foreign soil. It's remarkable to me, and it has been remarkable for the whole of this tournament, to hear the way he's basically pilloried the suspicion around him, the doubts around him, not from fans, but from the media, from the mainstream football analysing media, guys like Gary Lineker, Alan Shearer, who've played in World Cups and European Championships and finished top scorers in those esteemed tournaments. Don't really get what Gareth Southgate's trying to do here. Better than used to. That's what he's doing. And it got to the point where I was so upset. Now, there's a trickle-down effect, so there's a reason for a Scotsman to care about this, but there's another reason, which I'm going to kind of come into just now. It's a general attitude which I think dogs Rangers as well. It's this thing of you get to a point where something that you've been nowhere near, it was more enjoyable when you were nowhere near it. No, the banter years, for example, the minute you start getting closer to it, that's when things start getting really kind of toxic almost. Manchester City were constantly referenced during these Euros, not just because they had a few players there. People basically wanted an international football team. I know Spain played attractive football, but people wanted an international football team to play as well as a club side, and that club side they wanted them to play as well as was Manchester City, who have won 4 English Premier League titles on the trot. The first English team ever to win the top title 4 years on the trot. But we know how much money that's taken, and we know how few of the players are English. If you're playing international football, despite what FIFA are doing just now, you're necessarily playing far fewer games for your country than you are for your club, and you're all obviously, you can't build up the relationships on the field that you can with others. Players are always going to play worse for their country than they do for their club. Nearly. I mean, there's a few. Scott McTominay might be a shining example of somebody who does it the other way around, but 99 times out of 100, players will play much worse for their country than they do for their club, because just not used to they're not used to the players. They're not playing with the same players. There's just not that same familiarity with each other. The manager doesn't at the same time to work with them on tactics, etc. And there's a constant cry. It might well happen. They want Jurgen Klopp. They want Pep Guardiola as manager of the England team, and it might well happen. That might be the next step, but only because those guys want to retire and they want a change. Those guys aren't in charge of any country. Spain's manager De La Fuente is exactly the same as Southgate, if not, as I've said before, less experienced. I think his best spell as a club manager, his highest job in club management was at Alaves when they were in the 3rd division in Spain, and he lasted 3 months. Southgate has been manager of Middlesbrough, but De La Fuente, the Spain manager, has been through all the youth levels with Spain, under 18s, under 16s, I think, right up to under 21s, under 23s. Southgate was under 21s manager, and Spain have been dominating. They've been winning lots of the underage tournaments. England won the under 18s, under 6, I can't remember what age group it was, but they did win an underage group World Cup relatively recently. And Southgate has been, he was an FA man, and I think that's the way to go. You need to, if you're going to establish a style, you might as well have the players that understand that style, that they've been playing it from an early age. So you're kind of drawing a kind of club atmosphere, which means you necessarily have to drop players who haven't been involved in it, or who are doing particularly well for their club but don't fit the system. Because Spain were playing to a real system. Alvaro Morata has getting death threats. And this isn't obviously, this isn't from, Alvaro Morata played for Real Madrid, and he's now playing for Atletico Madrid, so it's not as if he's a Basque or he's a Catalan who's betraying his people by playing for centrist, monarchist Castile, but this is people who want Spain to win, have been given death threats to Alvaro Morata, who's playing up front in 4-2-3-1 for Spain. Harry Kane, he's getting questioned. Why is Harry Kane getting played all the time for England? He scored more than twice as many goals as Morata at international level. He's been top scorer in the World Cup. He scored more goals in the knockout stages of the European Championships than any other player in history. That's because the Euro's been expanded, during Harry Kane's career. But the final is the knockout stages of the European Championships. Gareth Southgate would be hung, drawn, and quartered if he didn't play that man at the start of the European Championship final. So I get so upset with the way the man was being pilloried for taking England closer to glory than anybody other than Alf Ramsey, that I was citing, and I like to cite my references and say who it is I'm talking about, give examples, so I'm not just shooting into the wind, not just screaming into the wind with this patter. And I've been mentioning everybody, who's the guy, John Murray, is it John Murray? I forgot his name, who does the 5 Live interviews. He's been absolutely terrible. Kelly Summer, who does the stuff for 5 Live and the BBC TV. Gabriel Clark, he's been awful. Somebody else, Lineker and Shearer and Gary Neville talked a lot of crap as well during these Euros. So I'll always mention what I'm talking about. I'll try to cite the actual example of talking about them getting something wrong. I woke up on the Monday morning after European Championships, and I've been slagging Rio Ferdinand as well. mentioned everybody that I had a problem with. Not atting them, I wasn't, directly messaging them. I wouldn't do that on Twitter. But Kelly Summer got in touch with me. She get back to me. Of course, the blokes, you hear nothing from them. It's the women who's got the guts to actually come back and go, no, listen, mate, I think you're out of order. And I've been talking, I found her interview post-match of the European Championship finals, England's first ever final on foreign soil. I found it quite aggressive, and I found it there was a kind of bloodlust to it, when really this man should be getting praised for what he's just achieved. And she get back to me going, well, I've got to ask the questions that everybody wants answered. And she was right. She's bang on. Of course, I'm in a situation where I'm thinking, oh, great, I now look like a sexist pig who's been, oh, the women's not asking the right questions, typical. So I get back to her as politely as I possibly could. And then I think, if I started a pile on Kelly Summers, because I don't want a pile on Gareth Southgate, I'm going to look like a sexist bastard. But luckily, it was lots of men coming to defend Kelly. And it was me that was getting piled on, not very extensively, but it was fine. I was happy to take that. But lots of guys saying, that they loved Kelly and she's doing a great job. And quite right, when I fail at my job, I expect my bosses to ask what's going on. Kelly's quite right to be asking Southgate. And I'm like, hasn't he failed though? He hasn't failed. Under what rubric has he actually failed when he's done better than any other previous England manager when it comes to a tournament on foreign soil? Italia 90, they had 3 terrible games in the group stage. They get through with the 2 draws and a win. Republic of Ireland, the Netherlands, and Egypt, all stuck in Sardinia. And then they had an overhead kick by David Platt in the last minute of extra time in the last 16. A terrible game there, a terrible deadlock, a bit like the game with Slovakia this summer. They were expected to wipe the floor with Cameroon, and they eventually won it, but they got a major scare in the quarter-final, and they lost to the Germans on penalties in the semi-final after a do or draw. And they make documentaries about that. That's celebrated. That's one of the greatest summers ever in the history of English football. Gareth Southgate's gone one stage further. I know the Euros isn't quite as important as the World Cup, but to make up for that, it's his second straight final, and he's going one stage further, and he's getting slagged. It's been told it's terrible football that he's playing, and he should be doing better with these players. No one playing for England has scored in the final of the Champions League, whereas no one playing for England. Bellingham will win a Ballon d'Or, but not. He hasn't won it yet, whereas Wayne Rooney scored in the Champions League final. Michael Owen's a Ballon d'Or. Kevin Keegan's a Ballon d'Or. Stanley Matthews a Ballon d'Or. All these players, they never got to a semi-final with England. They never got to a final with England. Wayne Rooney scored in the final of the Champions League. He's played in the team with Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard, who've both won the Champions League, both scored in the final. Both lost the final as well. There'll be much better England teams than this one, much better England squads that have never got anywhere near a final of a major international tournament. So the thing people are missing with Southgate is the fact that he's actually forged a relationship with the media, but it's at the point where the media just feel they can say anything to him. They can just basically say, you've only won that semi-final with a goal in the last minute. That's rubbish. That's no good enough at all. But there wasn't any kind of, England, what character they're showing. They're constantly getting through these tricky games, and they're getting over the line, and they're getting to the final. It was like, oh God, they've done it again. I don't know how they managed that. That was pure lucky, by the way, kind of attitude. It was absolutely, they get no praise whatsoever. And to me, that annoys me. That's the thing I'll always remember about Euro 2024. It kind of annoys me. No one ever, by the way, no one's ever played as well as this Spain team. No one, other Spain teams have played as well as this, but it's very rare you get a side winning a major tournament by winning all the games. It's very, very rare. Excuse me. And we have to remember that Spain, I know it's kind of the reserve team, but they only beat Albania by 1-0. They eventually put 4-1 past the Georgians, but that's because they managed to take lead against Georgia. Georgia had to pile forward, and they picked them off at the back. They weren't exactly going goal crazy. England and Spain both won their semi-finals by 2-1. But somehow England were terrible and Spain were fantastic. And I mean, the Netherlands at Euro 88, they beat the Soviet Union in the final, but the Soviet Union beat them in the group stage. And of course Portugal, they won Euro 2016 after drawing all 3 of their group games. It's the stuff being thrown at England is just totally unfair. And it's suddenly this lust for Spain being the way things are done and the model England should follow. They kind of have. There was a kind of a policy announcement way back, was it 2010 or something? I can't remember. St George's Park and all that, and England decided they were going to play in a certain way, and it was all about possession. Spain were better at that game than them, but they were basing themselves then, I think, on the Pep Guardiola tiki-taka model, and they've got to the stage where at least they can exploit it to the point where they're getting to a final. The Dutch there should be more a criticism for the Dutch, because it's the Dutch system that the Spanish have taken via probably Arrigo Sacchi, is Milan in the late 80s, and kind of Fabio Capello taking over in the 90s there. But that possession model, developed by him, like Ronald Koeman played for Rinus Michel, who developed total football as we know it, which is because Michel and then Johan Cruyff, who was his representative on the pitch, end up at the Nou Camp. It's there at Barcelona, and because Cruyff he's the manager of Guardiola in later years at Barca, it eventually becomes the model that they're the model of possession football. It's what they take on board at Barcelona. But Barcelona used to be vicious. They used to be a horrible, horrible team to play against because they were just brutal. They'd kick people off the park. They were just out and out cheats. And the whole of Spanish football, every La Liga club was exactly the same. Vindictive, vicious bampots up until the 90s, really, up until they could sign so many foreigners that they end up having innately entertaining teams. And then Guardiola kind of commodified and quantified that and tried to think of a way to build it into attack. But you need to have the players to do that. And again, it's all about money. But this idea that the Spanish have always been the way to do things is completely wrong. And England are following the model that the Spanish set up to ensure the success they eventually had in the kind of first into the second decade of this century. England are following that, and they're doing no bad off the back of it. And it speaks to me. I'm just going to round this. I'm going to finish this pod, folks. It's going too long. I haven't even started talking about Rangers, but I am talking about Rangers really, because this thing of when things are bad, it's okay. When you're nowhere near reaching international finals, if you're England, or when you're nowhere near the the top flight of Scottish football, if you're Rangers coming back from the liquidation of the holding company. And then when you get there, when you get close to it, that's when it starts, as I say, becoming toxic. That's really weird. Manchester City constantly getting referred to. It's as if throughout these Euros as the kind of example of how people want things to be. That's touristic. That's the kind of people who just watch football instead of Star Wars or whatever like that. They've got this whole kind of tourist, overgrown Wayne attitude towards how football should be played and how it should be. Just sitting on their sofa, ordering their Domino's, getting their Budweiser in, and Man City are going to dominate. And it's like they're not supporters as such. They're more like aesthetes. And there's nothing wrong with wanting entertaining football. Entertaining football and flash football, if it works, it's fantastic. A fantastic thing to watch. But I'm a football fan. As much as I admire the international game, I admire all forms of football. I want to go and watch football everywhere and anywhere. Everything that I feel about football comes from my love of Rangers and my love of the Scotland national team and wanting them to win. And proper football fans, the guys who pay their money through the gates, first and foremost, they want results. We'll worry about performances later. As long as we're not out and out cheating, we just want to see our team winning. Winning football is entertaining. And with Rangers getting to the UEFA Cup final in 2008 and getting pilloried by just bitter people in Scotland who hate Rangers for other reasons, understandable reasons. It's boring to watch. Well, 3 or 4 penalty shootouts and all that to get yourself to the European final isn't particularly boring. It's quite exciting in a weird sort of way. But what it means, it's not expansive, it's not entertaining. But I didn't hear those people telling us how exciting our run was to the 2022 Europa League final, when we were absolutely scintillating to watching. Our games were massively entertaining for the neutral. And personally, I didn't care, because I just want to see my team getting there and doing the business. But there seems to be this idea that England should suddenly play like Manchester City, when even Manchester City, who were the real Manchester club back when they were beating Gillingham in third division playoff finals at Wembley, and on penalties, that was really that was more entertaining than Manchester United winning in the last minute against Bayern Munich at the Nou Camp in the Champions League final, because it was the real Manchester team, and they could feel a bit of solidarity about that. You didn't get to, even when the money started pouring in to Manchester City. What was it? The FA Cup. They won the FA Cup in 2011. Then they win the league for the first time in this era. They won it in the 60s and the 30s, obviously, but they won it in the first time in this era, 2012, and then they struggled to retain it, and they retain it a couple of times, and now they're winning 4 in a row. But basically, it's what, 12 years between them winning the FA Cup to really their first solid material gain of this horrible fascistic regime pumping money into them. It's basically, it's well over a decade before they win the Champions League, which is the ultimate aim. We see the same thing happen at Paris Saint-Germain. They've reached one Champions League final and lost it in 2020. It's just not happening for them at all. So that it took over a decade, even with all the money in the world, your ability to pick any player you wanted and any manager you wanted, it still took that time for Manchester City to achieve their ultimate aim. And the final they won in the Champions League against Inter was about as entertaining as the one they lost against against Chelsea 2 years before that. So they weren't setting the heather on fire that way. People were watching them winning the Premier League and thinking, that's how I want England to play, that's how I want Internet. It'll never happen. And it's a false comparison. And the same thing happened with it. I don't know if there's a kind of sexual, a Freudian parallel, a Freudian analysis to be imposed on this. There's a kind of a sexual parallel where it's like, if you're, for want of a better phrase, if you're on your own and you're whining and dining, people hoping that you're going to get that kind of congress that you're seeking. It's it's nice. You're going out and about, you're going with your pals, what have you, get a few drinks in, and you're meeting somebody that's quite exciting. But it comes a certain point in that when you're building up a relationship with somebody that might get to a certain point where you need it to go that extra step. You're just at the penultimate stage. You just need it to go that extra step, or you're going to be really disappointed. You're going to be really gutted. You're not going to sit back and go, well, at least I know we're good companions. We're really intimate with each other. And I didn't have intimacy before. Now I've got it. You just there comes a certain point. It's a bit like that. Is the closer you get to it, the more toxic it gets. And I'm talking about James Tavernier. And Tav hasn't, as I'm speaking to you, officially left Rangers. It hasn't been sold yet. Connor Goldson seems to be on his way as well. And these are the losers. These are the guys, the absolute losers that we need to get rid of because they're rubbish. And that is rubbish. That assessment of them is rubbish. And it's like Rangers going through the lower leagues. It was so embarrassing, humiliating to be there. But yet, it's when we got into the top flight that our own fans really turned on us. When we're failing to win the league, we're getting pounded off Celtic regularly in the league. That's when it gets worse, where you're actually in a better position. It's actually less humiliating than drawing 0-0 with Montrose to win the third division. But it's a strange thing, and I think that's why I call James Tavernier the Fergus McCann of Rangers. He won't be appreciated until he's gone. And Fergus McCann was hounded by the Celtic fans eventually out the door. And it's only when Rangers went down the Swanee financially that they, right, that's suddenly we like Fergus McCann. Let's get a statue of that man outside Parkhead. I think you don't know what you've got until it's gone. England are going to get another manager and hopefully get the big name they're looking for, the big flash name that they're looking for, and they go on to win the World Cup or the European Championships or whatever. But even if they do that, it will be on the foundations that are built by Gareth Southgate. So well done to him, well done to Spain. And I'm going to wrap this up because it's far too long. That's my Euros review. Going to do another pod shortly after this, and I'll talk about everything going on with Rangers just now, because even when I'm talking about England, I am really talking about Rangers. But apologies to Kelly Summers. I'm sorry if I upset her, but well done to her for at least having the guts to come back at me, unlike all those blokes that she works for. Talk to you soon, folks.